Hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another episode of Demystifying AI, where we take AI topics, try to break them down, make them relevant to everybody, and really get into some cool stuff. I'm super excited for today's episode. We've got a star-studded cast here, so you might notice, there's three of us that you might regularly see, and one super cool guest. For those of you who don't know, I'm Will Dowling. I'm a product marketing manager here at ConnectWise, and I am the host of this fancy little show here. I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to our guest today to introduce himself. So
the super cool guest.
The super cool guest.
That's right.
Absolutely.
I'm so glad because no one ever calls me that.
See, super cool.
Mr. Dowling, thank you. Hello, everybody. I feel so honored to be here with the star-studded crew. And Jake Varghese, I'm the Executive VP and General Manager for the Business Management Business Unit here at ConnectWise. And I can't wait to talk to you about AI.
Super excited.
Biggest title in the room. I'm just the innovation director here with ConnectWise, so I get to play with all the toys. But you know me, my name's Kyle Jackson.
And Keith Sartain, Senior Director of IT for all of internal IT at ConnectWise.
All right. Well, I'm the low man on the totem pole in this room today. Awesome. So let's, kind of kick things off. I know, the topic I always like to start us off with is what's got you excited this week. I'm going to kick the topic off this week because, as many of you know, we're here in Tampa, Florida, and pretty significant hurricane just came through. So how does this relate to AI, though, right? Well, so there's a new model. It's the AIFS model, and it was able to predict landfall for Hurricane Milton within 7 miles of actual landfall 5 days before it made landfall. It was more accurate than every other model prediction. It had like a 13-mile margin of error. Now, why is that relevant, right? Well, think about this. If you're an MSP, if you have 5 days of warning, and you know roughly within a fairly accurate range where it's going to hit, you can start your disaster prep early. You can make sure your customers are battened down, that they have everything they need to get back up and running. It gives you more time to make sure that you're able to recover a lot more quickly. And that's just on your side of things. So if this model does prove to continue to be this accurate as it was with Milton in the future, we may be looking at a whole new way to make sure that you're ready to support your customers more effectively. Like, super cool, right?
Yeah, that's great. And honestly, just using the meteorological world as a way to explain ML models and AI models has, it's been a great example for that, because everybody knows what that looks like and how that spaghetti model and the probability model is put together for that, and where, you're just taking in all of the data factors from water temperature across, the different buoys all over the ocean, and how that impacts how all that data coming together. That math would be ridiculously hard for a single human to do and try to accomplish getting to an outcome of saying, how do we? So it's amazing. We've had these models, these spaghetti models for years, and they've used machine learning to accomplish that. Just the technology getting better gets us better results. And that's just a great example of how that's going to get us that much finer. And I will tell you, as somebody who was in the path and the eye went over my house, it would have been great to know, because I watched every broadcast I could up to that. It would have been great to know 5 days in advance it was actually going to go over my house. So honestly, I wouldn't have been in my house had I known that. So that that's a perfect example of that.
Right there with you. It went over my house, and I would have loved to know, because it, kept wobbling. And when you have a cone that's, 100 miles wide margin of error versus a cone that's 13 miles wide margin of error, that is a huge difference. It can help you be able to focus on where you need to put your effort a lot more quickly.
Yeah. You're not supposed to hear your roof trusses.
Right. No, you're not supposed to hear that.
That's the eerie part about that people don't tell you about hurricanes. It's like, all the stuff that just the sounds of your house as there's 100-mile-an-hour winds outside.
Yeah, houses aren't supposed to make those noises, guys.
They creak and moan and scream.
Just a couple of points on that. One is, I I was here for Helene,
Yeah, yeah, you were. That's right.
and I got to experience some of that myself.
Your
It was
first,
your first
one?
hurricane.
First hurricane.
All
Yeah.
right.
And I decided to stay because
See all
I
of that.
just wanted to be here. And I was not here for Milton.
Yeah.
And
Good.
I mean, my heart goes out to all of our partners and our colleagues who are impacted, are still impacted, because I chatted with a couple today. So, best wishes. Super glad to hear that, that we can put science to good use
Absolutely.
and AI to good use. The second kind of personal connection is my partner, Sue. She works for NOAA.
Oh, wow.
Right. I mean,
Okay.
so that's the go-to source
Yeah.
at this particular point in time. So it's good to see that, the rest of the country gets to experience what some of our leading researchers are doing to solve problems that impact broad swaths of society, and especially when it comes to Tampa, it really hits home.
That's awesome.
So thanks for mentioning that.
Yeah.
Will, that's awesome.
Keith, I'm going to kick it over to you, man. What you got?
Yeah. Several things we could talk about. The one I wanted to bring up is the new greatest model ever of the week is what I call it. So,
Greatest model ever of the week.
Yes.
Love it.
We're going to look back at all our shows and make fun of how excited we were about models that were 1/50th as good as the ones 2 weeks later. But we always
change that to bi-weekly at some point.
Yeah,
Yeah,
bi-weekly
right.
model of the week.
So Nematron. So the guys at NVIDIA, they don't just make processors; they have AI that they do internally. We've talked before about their world model, which I think is going to be a seed for robotics. I think that's going to be interesting work. But they did work to improve Llama. So Llama is made by the Meta Group, and it's open source. So they took that open source model and they improved it. What we've seen recently is that, and what they did in this one, is they're using synthetic data and different techniques to get even more out of the model. So the 70B is 70 billion parameters, which isn't big by big scheme of things. This time last year, the guy from Daniel Amadei from Anthropic said everybody was racing to 100 billion parameters, 100 trillion parameters. 100 trillion parameters, and we were at 1.7 trillion. So you would have thought maybe we would be at 20 or 30 or 50 by now. But this is a 70 billion, which is something that is reasonable to run for an enterprise, and it's outperforming 4.0 and some others, at least on the early benchmarks. I haven't seen a full review of it yet. But what's interesting is that, to me, is that we continue training these models and finding new ways to train them, and we don't necessarily have to scale, at least computationally, to get more. Now, they're scaling at the training phase. So NVIDIA is paying a lot of money and Meta's paying a lot of money to make an expensive training run, but then they're making that open source. And these trillion-dollar companies are paying it forward, but then you don't have to have as much compute power to have the high resolution results. So both the 0.1 model, the poorly named 0.1 model, and Strawberry and these things, all of that use synthetic data. And there was some concern that we're running out of public data and that we wouldn't be able to train these models any further, and that what are you going to do when you exhaust the data? And if you try to use synthetic data, there was a challenge that you would overfit, you would overtrain, and that these models would become, a little bit too self-reinforcing and not have, kind of the creativity that you have if you have variety of data. It seems like they've cracked the nut on that. So they've figured out how to have synthetic data without overtraining. And these latest couple of models are kind of evidence of the fact that we might get more out of small, medium-sized models going forward, which will be things that are computationally approachable for your enterprise. So something you can run yourself.
It's wild to me that when we talk about AI, we use the word billion and small in the same sentence.
70 billion is relatively small.
Yeah, that's just a wild concept when you think about it.
Yeah. So anyway, that's what's got me. Nematron just came out recently. All these guys are going to leapfrog, and I think everybody's reverse engineered what Strawberry is. We know where it started. It kind of started as the star paper, but people, they've already released papers. All the big guys have released papers. This is what we think it is, and they're all going to do it, right? So we all kind of know that in there's probably a 3 or 6 month advantage for OpenAI on that technology that they have that's doing good reasoning. But that makes it exciting if all of these guys are chasing each other and they've got the pockets to to keep improving, and they know what each other's doing. That I think
Hey,
will be the
that's-
ones that benefit.
That's so funny, because when I was growing up,
Yeah,
right, there was this thing called Moore's law, right?
yeah.
What was the original Moore's law?
Well, the transition. Well, I
The
think
number-
transistor count would double every 18 to 24 months. I
That's
think.
right.
Right.
No, you nailed it. It's 1820. So there's like this new Moore's law now, which is everything that you know is going to change
Yeah.
over the course of 3 months.
Bi-weekly
I
at
mean,
this point.
I love the fact that we're all alive
Yeah.
at this particular point in time to see this type of unprecedented change. And I'm so excited about the stuff that's coming. For example, right about 2 decades ago, Mark Andreessen said that software is going to eat the world.
Eating the world. Yep.
Right. And now what's happening is AI is eating software.
Yeah, it is.
Right. And I was just
Absolutely.
listening to, and so I love the fact that we're teeing these conversations.
Yeah.
Is that I was paying attention to what Jensen was talking about. And he was saying that previously, right, hardware was rapidly iterating. Then software started iterating. And now the entire stack is iterating rapidly.
Yeah.
And what happens in that sort of a scenario is unprecedented.
Absolutely is.
And it's just everything that you know seems to be disrupted on a quarterly basis.
And the research
incredible
is
time.
accelerating with it. So I think that
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
the hype cycle has the research, but there's something like 100 white papers a day. There's no way to keep up. Like someone has to filter it for you, and you have to cherry pick.
You need an AI filter.
Yeah. But it's definitely an exciting time.
Yeah, it's crazy. There's a book called The Future is Faster Than You Think. And the irony of this is the book is probably now about 6 years old. But it talked about the fact that the convergence of all of these technologies happening at the same time, that we're gonna hit a level of productivity that we've never had. And you've heard Sam and Jensen and all these guys talking about single entrepreneurs. Who's the first single entrepreneur, one person company that's going to be a $100 million valuation, or like at some major point. So we're going to get to a point of productivity where you're going to be able to just go do and create and accomplish. So yeah, it's exciting. It's also a little scary.
Yeah, it is a little scary.
But I would say Nematron as probably the best named model that I've heard so far. I mean, it is the most nerd robotic name that I've heard. Like that, it feels like it's the best name. So I'm gonna put my vote for that one.
Too many
Love it.
groks out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, too many groks.
Some awkwardly named models. Let's put it that way. Anyways, and then open source. So let's jump into that conversation. We're gonna bridge all of them. So OpenAI this week released, unofficially didn't release. I don't know how it happened, but Swarm, actually one of their engineers tweeted about a Git deposit making their agency technology or their framework around that called Swarm available. And so there's 3 things we need to know about Swarm. It allows for what they call routines, where basically just a set of steps, which quite honestly is just the system message defined appropriately for like what you want to accomplish. It allows for handoffs, so or let's say agents, so that agent is now has a defined purpose, and then it allows for handoffs between those agents. So really cool when we start talking about agency, that OpenAI, who is leading edge and taking charge in this front, made this available. Good news, bad news is that Swarm at this point is leveraging. It is not hold your memory. It is not leveraging any of the. It's single shot basically, right? When we're talking about its ability to hold on to, it doesn't know your memory. It doesn't, so it's basically all encompassing in this single chunk of data that you're passing it. But the capabilities are fantastic. So the handoff, and what I've seen, what I've been able to look at, and I played with it just a little bit, but not enough to say that I'm really understanding completely. But the handoff is almost magical. To hand a single conversation off from one agent who is an expert to another one. So we've all played with that. We've all done that in our prompting capabilities, but like to be able to do that with Python and drive an outcome between 2 experts or 2 expert agents, I think it's just going to change things. It's going to enable us from our perspective. Like Jake, I mean, we normally don't go into the ConnectWise world, but Jake, you own a decent chunk of the ConnectWise world when it comes to operationalizing AI. What's agency going to do for ConnectWise and our partners and their downstream customers? Like it's almost too much to talk about.
No, I mean, Kyle is, by the way, I love this conversation.
Yeah, it's a great one,
How it's
isn't it?
proceeding. No, I love it. It's just, it's great, so great to sit with kind of kindred spirits here, right? All talking about AI, but I think about the agentic world or the agentic way all the time, and I'm privileged enough to manage a set of products where it kind of fits almost perfectly. Right, but and I apologize if some of this has been covered previously. But
Look,
when I
you're
think
good.
about this, I have a lot of folks asking questions around, hey, what's this thing about agents, right? I'm sure you've defined it. So I typically try to think of things in terms of kind of mnemonics and frameworks, because that's how my brain processes information. So my kind of simple framework on how to, or mental model on how to think about the agents is, I call it the RAMI model, R-A-M-I.
All right. Let's hear it.
So let's think about this, right?
Mhm.
We're trying to figure out how to plan a vacation, right? I'm trying to figure out, I'd love to have my vacation.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is pretty complex if you think about it, right? So let's introduce the first element of this framework, reasoning, right? It actually understands, not only understands the query, but it's able to reason and says, okay, I know this person called Jake. I have some sense of his preferences, etc. And I have a sense for where he wants to go, family situation, etc. The second thing is not just reasoning. That's the second part of the framework. It's just A, and you talked about it, it's action. It can not only reason, but it can take action.
Yeah.
And through action, it can connect to multiple tools, what algorithms, etc. Then here's the third part, which is really important. And I think Kyle referenced it. It's got memory, right? Historical context. So that's the M. And then it tries something and it iterates, right? So that's RAMI. And it keeps doing it, and it gets better. Now imagine you take that sort of same model, and to your point of the single person entrepreneur, you applied that to the context of the MSP and the way that they're trying to do business, right?
Yeah.
They have very talented folks that they have hired, trained, desperately trying to retain. But while at the same time, what they would like to do most is to spend time with their customers,
Right. Yeah.
and spend time with their family, right? It's not this monotonous stuff they have to do on an ongoing basis, late night phone calls. Enter agents, right? Essentially able to decompose the vast majority of the workflows that makes up an MSP, and also gives it that specialization. Keith Sartain's MSP is very different than Kyle Jackson's versus Will Dowling's, right?
Yeah.
I'm able to take the essence of my service, decompose that into a set of agents, and do like hyper localized way of taking care of my customers in the way that they want to be cared for. And that's how I spend a lot of time, Kyle knows this, thinking about how we could incorporate that within the broader context of how we operate as ConnectWise and as IT Nation.
And if you go even further with that, as the MSP is looking at their client base, and one of the things that makes the MSP valuable is that they know their customer.
Yes.
Right? They know the inner workings of their customer. So applying that knowledge, that gained wisdom, right? And wisdom is such a hard thing to acquire.
Yes, it is.
Right? Wisdom takes grit and years and experience. It takes failing and winning. It takes effort, right? And so, like, how do you go? You can't, you go hire wisdom. You pay for it, right?
Yeah, 100%.
You go get that really experienced engineer, or that top tier person. You pay for their wisdom. Imagine taking the wisdom and knowledge and experience and all those iterations and all those wins and those losses, and wielding it on demand, all for the purpose of satisfying the needs of your client. It's such a fantastical, beautiful picture. But the thing that we just talked about is that It's here, like it's within reach. We're not even talking about the Jetsons anymore.
Right.
No.
We're talking about the guy right down the street.
Talking
because
about
it
next Tuesday.
It is
man.
our neighbor.
Yeah.
It is right here. So it is so cool. Like I agree with you. I'm bullish on this stuff. Honestly, there are some times where I get scared and I'm freaking out because I don't know what the world's going to look like in 5 years. But I do know that the grind is going to change.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
The grit and the effort is going to change. Not in some ways that's bad. We've talked about that and we can unpack that. But for a lot of ways, the ability to go from where I am to where I need to go is going to get easier.
And by the way, can I also use this moment to pay homage to two of the stalwarts
Absolutely.
on whose supremely broad shoulders we're all standing on that enable these outcomes. Just a shout out to Professor Jeffrey Hinton and to John Hopfield, who 2 weeks ago won the Nobel Prize for their stellar work, foundational work in artificial intelligence,
Amazing.
having to do with neural networks, right? And so John Hopfield and Jeff Hinton. And at the same time, the beautiful thing is they won the work for that, but as it applied to physics. Software
That's
is
what we
in
have
the
models
world.
for, right?
That's right.
That's what we have.
And similarly to Demystify and to John Jumper, who's from my alma mater, U Chicago. By the way, that's a huge milestone for University of Chicago because John Jumper is the 100th Nobel Prize winner from the University of Chicago. Wow. So huge shout out to John Jumper. But that is for their work on AlphaFold.
Yeah.
And with the DeepMind, and it's an incredible problem that they've solved using AI, trying to figure out what the three-dimensional protein structure given a sequence of amino acids looks like. And the best way to exemplify that, and I love this, is as soon as they released AlphaFold, one of the scientists who's been working on this problem says, I've spent 7 years trying to solve this problem, and boom, it was just solved like that.
Yeah.
That is what excites us, and is fearful at the very same time, right? So the question is, great, now that we have all this time, what other problems are we going to solve?
What are we doing next? Yeah.
I'll add on to that.
Yeah.
So Jeffrey Hinton, if there's a George Washington on the Mount Rushmore, it's him, right? He is the, really the godfather, the guy that took the notion of, how your brain works. He actually was thinking about working on a brain and it didn't do too well there, and then went over to computer science, and here we are. But, he did some time at Google, and you mentioned two people that were at Google, and you may not have known it, but the AIFS work was derived from DeepMind from Google. So
very cool.
And the OpenAI guy is Ilya Sutskever, and like everybody, like the coaching tree of Jeffrey Hinton is basically AI, right? So they a lot of people that spent time with him, and a lot of things that were branching off of the work that he did. So commend him. That's he's a guy that really, and he actually got scared when he saw where it was going last year. Left Google because he didn't feel like he could represent Google while he was advocating for the concerns and safety of AI. And in his acceptance speech, he was about a minute and a half in when he said, "I'm glad Ilya fired Sam." So I don't know if you saw that. So he thought that Sam was being a little reckless. Sam Altman at OpenAI was being a little reckless with his safety, and that his former student Ilya Sutskever, who's now left, and is doing super intelligence, but anyway, that he was proud of him for firing Sam. So,
history will tell. Or what? Maybe AI will rewrite history and we won't know.
That's right.
It'll make whatever it wants to be.
I, for one, welcome our new.
Yeah, I love and trust them.
Yeah, I trust them. Thank you, AI.
I think it's interesting though. Anthropic's CEO Dario this week talked about what he sees the future as, and the word utopia, which I just think is comical. Like when we start trying to, what does utopia look like, right? If we're working less, or if these agents are doing more, and like what are we going to do? I think I've referenced before, there's a Star Trek Next Generation episode that looks at this society that has computers running their whole world, and they just they play all day. Like that would be fantastic. But that's a transition to get to utopia. What does that look like? The efforts to get there. But the reality is here within the next year, we're going to have the capabilities to act on solving real world problems in the MSP space.
Mhm.
That thing you do that's super annoying, or that 17-step thing that you try to accomplish today is super hard.
Yep.
And it's intricate, and there requires some reasoning and some thought process. And we only do X if Y and W and T are true. But like the reasoning and thought process around all of that is complex. Well,
Yeah.
if we know that and then that's mappable, we can understand the process and thought, the reasoning for that. We can that's within reach. Like
100%.
so, there's for companies like us who are solving real world physical challenges, because the MSPs are real world physical challenges. It's fantastic to consider, how that's going to change and evolve.
And Kyle, I loved when you used the word wisdom. It's hard earned, right? The good thing about ConnectWise, the IT Nation, and just the way that we operate is that we've enabled the wisdom of the collective to grow, right, manyfold, and now, right, and also earn the trust of the community as a result of doing that. And now we have an opportunity to give every MSP, the ability to action on that hard-earned wisdom and enable them to scale in a way that they haven't been able to scale before, right? And just frankly reshape their work and reshape their lives as a result of this. I'm so excited for that future.
I think it's going to be great.
Let's get practical for a second, if you don't
Let's
mind.
do
So first off, we didn't establish this, but let's define real fast. If you have questions and comments, please, we'd like to address them live if we can. Otherwise, we'll try to get to them afterwards. But what do you own at ConnectWise? What product sets do you own? Because you referenced it, but we need to talk about it. And then, what does that mean for, give us one example.
Yeah.
In real world.
No, thank you for that. Let's keep it real. It's so 7 products in the portfolio. Just did a quick run. ConnectWise PSA, it's the CPQ, Brightgauge, IT Boost, Smileback Service Leadership, and our payment solution, WisePay. So a lot of my focus right now, Kyle, is on PSA. Right? We're bringing PSA into Asia. In fact, for a fair number of you, you might have started receiving emails and saying, "Hey, congratulations, you have been provisioned for PSA within Asia."
Those aren't AI generated, by the way.
They are not
No, I
AI
wrote most of
generated,
those
not yet. But it's this beautiful experience that we built with Asia. We had our RMM solution on there, Security 360. Now PSA is joining the party. So I spent a lot of time along with my friends here, enabling that outcome. And gosh, I should not have given that away because that's an IT Nation thing too. But hey, you know what? It's a sneak preview about some of the things that we're going to talk about IT Nation, and you can start playing with it. Right? These are not. I'm not going to get up there and show you a roadmap, but that keeps me occupied pretty much every waking hour. But having said that, I also wonder, for all the things that we do today that might not be as efficient. Yes, I mean, there's ways that we can use a nice user experience to reduce clicks, etc. But if I can eliminate stuff, and do it on your behalf, right? And the work that we're doing on Sidekick and RPA and the rest of the hyper automation suite, that also takes up a good chunk of time, right? So it's just everything, Kyle, seems to be coming together, right? I mean, the stuff that we've talked about for a little bit is just coming together, and you can start playing with it, and it's so amazing to witness this.
What has honestly been frustrating, and I'm just going to put it on the table for you guys to experience this, is while we're chasing a problem space for MSPs and trying to understand, okay, here's the problem, we think we could go solve it with this, and AI in these ways are going to help get there. We're not just looking at the tools and saying, what can we do with it? We're looking actually at the actual problem. But because the technology is changing every 2.5 weeks, we will have mapped out a solution over here, and then, oh crap, there's this new way to do it that's 3 times faster. Now we've got to go chase that thing. So we're constantly jumping over to the new, latest and greatest. At some point that will equalize, and the efforts will get a whole lot easier. And that's what's cool about the agency and the agentic workflow process, because today a lot of the things that we've done with AI have been, hey, let me get this data, do something with this data, and bring it back and help you accomplish something that's cleaner, simpler, faster, a little bit easier to understand maybe. right? But when we start adding agency and I can do some reasoning, then I can actually take that data, make an evaluation of it, start to wield that over here, maybe with another subset of data, and then bring back for you like, hey, here's what we think you need to do.
Yeah, it's the classic REPL loop, if you think about it, right? And it's so funny when you say that is because ConnectWise has been at the helm of industry-wide change for 40 plus years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? What's amazing about this moment in time is that we have a platform
We sure do.
that ensures that all this change is at least a couple of degrees separated from our MSPs, who frankly don't want to deal with this type of change. That's ConnectWise. It's your problem.
Right.
Figure out how to
Absolutely.
inoculate me from this type of change, because I got to take care of my customers,
Right.
and I have to take care of my employees, right? Very tough job.
Yeah.
And by the way, I also have a life.
Right?
Right?
Life.
So-
What's that, Jake?
The fact that, with ASIO, everything coming together and hyper automation in the mix, that enables us, that gives us the velocity to adapt to the change. So I'm so grateful that ASIO exists. All the solutions are getting on top of it, and it accommodates hyper automation.
Think about, with things like the platform, what we can do if we're looking at AI and driving efficiency. Like we can even go so far, and this is not us saying we're doing it. This is literally just me throwing an idea out there as, kind of a thought. Looking at like, hey, we got somebody dispatched out to these 15 tickets that they have to go on site for, right? Being able to use AI to go, hey, you should do it in this order for these different places. Here's the route you need to take. Like stuff like that is
What you just described is easy.
Yeah, it's doable.
Right.
Yeah.
The complicated, challenging stuff. We're talking about physical logistics.
Yeah.
Who's got the worst problem?
Exactly.
Just those things are easy to accomplish, but like some of the harder things of like, okay, I'm looking at agreements. How do I rectify agreements?
Yep.
How do I find tickets that should have been on an agreement, or maybe like, so like there's some complicated things that require wisdom
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
experience and knowledge. If we can take that wisdom and experience and knowledge and quantify it and wield it, then we can hand back up to the MSPs and the partners. Hey, here's some things that you can take action on.
Yeah.
We've already vetted.
Yeah,
We've already got them ready for you. And at some point, we'll get past the point of trust, where you'll insert that A with action, and you'll say, just turn the lever on and let it go.
Yeah.
We trust you now, and let it go. And how great will that be? But even before then, we'll now have the ability with agency to actually hand you pre-vetted reports or pre-vetted thought process or pre-vetted processes that are just, all right, I need to validate it and go.
Yeah.
The good thing is that, Kyle, the platform enables us to do the guardrails
Yep.
to the degree that you're comfortable. And frankly, the degree of comfort that, Keith, Kyle, you have, and I have would be very different
Yeah, absolutely.
for different types of tasks, right? And having that type of granularity to be able to widen or narrow down those guardrails.
It's huge. Keith, you've been kind of quiet, and you also run our internal IT here.
That's because I've been talking too
Well,
much.
I know,
So
you
that's
know,
Jake.
You're the star of the show.
You're the star of the show today, man.
You don't
He's used to
have
it. But,
stage the star.
I feel like a lot of this is really relevant to what you and your team do as well.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, we do 3,000. I think we've peaked around 4,000 tickets a month with for just the internal IT, and then you add on networking and system engineering and a couple acquisitions, and it goes up from there. But all of that we always look at. Automation's always been top of mind for us. I do have an RPA team, but the agentic stuff is always exciting. That's something that we want to get into because you can encode some routines as actions, right? And so what you find if you do this enough is that there's a certain set of routines that you repeat quite often. Now, it might take you a little bit of diagnostic to get to that routine, but you don't know that it's this routine that's going to fix it because it gets reported in a different way or whatever. But if we have routines that fix things that are automations, and then we can kind of encode how we diagnose to get to that, now we can start thinking about how we get a technician faster information to push this button. So now the technician is more productive. And I think that's the Goldilocks zone is where that is. And I think it'll be a while. And even if it's forever that we don't get to where the automation hits every lever, and it's forever feeding information to a human that's digesting it and then pulling the lever, that's still a massive gain,
Absolutely.
especially if you've encoded the wisdom of everybody in the group,
Yeah.
having done it before, and so that they're fed to your technician all the wisdom of your peers to pick the lever of choice, right, or a recommendation.
It elevates that starting point too, because you
Yeah.
can take a newer tech and they immediately have the
Yeah.
wisdom of all of those veterans at their fingertips.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and that's the promise. It's going to
Yeah.
take some time to get there. I think we have to meet the AI at this point. The AI might keep coming to us. We might build something, and 2 years from now, it might have solved for the thing we solved for to meet it in the middle. But I think there's enough meat there right now that if you make an investment in agentic frameworks, that you're going to get return on it.
There's no question you need to be leaning this into this technology, right? If you haven't already started playing with AI and figuring out this is 100% the future. So whether or not it's again, and I'll say this, we normally don't, we try to steer this conversation and this platform away from this is a ConnectWise commercial. We couldn't miss or not take advantage of the opportunity of Jake being here to talk about the what ifs of his world.
Yeah, absolutely.
With agency being a real boy now at this point.
He's an expert in the industry.
Truly is.
absolutely.
That happens to work for us.
So let's talk about that for half a second, Jake. So as a former developer yourself, who by the way worked on Clippy, right?
Yeah.
Our very first experience with some form of
Clippy's back, Kyle.
Well, to be
back, buddy.
fair, Clippy was the first ML model that most of us engaged with,
Yeah.
not knowing that we were. So the first chatbot tool we ever played with. But from that perspective, from a developer's perspective, talk about the difference between like what it takes to hard code solving a problem as opposed to building in reasoning into the tool, and how that gives us a completely different path for fixing the. And I'm putting you on the spot here.
No,
But
this is great. I mean, and thanks for mentioning that. My first role was exactly the team that was working on Clippy, and it became Microsoft Bob, another product that no one knows about. But then I went into the natural language team at Microsoft, working with a bunch of researchers. But yes, the point is, if you decompose what a developer does on an ongoing basis, right? They're trying to do exactly what I said before, right? They've been given a problem. How do I deconstruct it, right? In order to do that, I need to have reasoning ability. I need to harness my memory either from academia and from experience and the wisdom of all my peers around me, right? Kyle might be the subject matter expert in that area code. I got to find time with Kyle because he's working on something else himself. So I'm waiting, send him a pull request. Hey, do you have a moment? Right, and previously when I started, I had to walk and talk to someone, right? And then the ability to do that and iterate. So when you have stuff like GitHub Copilot, or you have Replit, right? So suddenly now you have a agent right there with you that is almost anticipating what you're going to do and finishes up. That's just degree one, right? Like you said, that's easy, right? That's LLM stuff.
Yeah.
And the next one is something that can take a query and gives you a great starting point. That's what you said, right? And then you just build on that. So now I'm able to do more complex stuff quickly, and over a period of time, it'll be more precise, and the number of issues that could emerge from it will go down, right? Because you know where the problems lie and also where the opportunities lie. Where do they lie? It's on the edges, right? That's where the problems and the opportunities lie. And so now those edges will become even more sophisticated, and it's going to be a small sliver relative to where it is today.
But when we think about the code base of just pick any one of our products, like a developer had to think of all of the nuances of possibilities for how we want it to be used, how it could break, like all of the functions that get built in built into an application are all designed around the what ifs of how is this going to use, how's it going to work, how's it going to fall apart, right? Now with agency and having bots, like we could give the agent access to the data and train it to know how to wield that data, and then just call the agent to give me the data, as opposed to all 19 or maybe 1900 different functions that otherwise would have been included in that hard-coded application.
I could not agree more. And well, I'll just finish up.
Oh, no,
The
go for it.
PSA is extremely complex.
That's what I was
Yeah.
going to say too.
And the complexity is not just in the lines of code, but in the various permutations in which the code gets traversed. No one thinks about the states there, right?
Yeah.
They just think,
yeah.
a million lines of code. No, it's how that code gets traversed. And then the complexity is, you know this, Keith, because it's a distributed system. Right? There's permutations there as well. Right? I think one of the best examples is what happened last week of AI and science really taking over. Is you saw that Starship
Yeah.
coming back
Yeah.
and getting connected
Yeah.
in there?
Yeah.
That was the first run.
Yep.
That was the first run. Can you imagine, right? Something like that. I mean, the audacity to think, to even attempt something like that and to land it
Yeah.
the very first time. The
Yeah, well,
audacity to do that, it's because
Catch it with
of the
salad
ability.
forks.
Exactly.
Like,
The
yeah,
ability.
salad- yeah.
I would say there's a lot of AI that went in the back because of the simulations that took place.
Yeah.
But that's the beauty. Imagine something that could never work before, or would used to take a lot of tries with a lot of capex associated with it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now gets done the first time around.
Yeah.
What's the world going to look like
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic.
in that sort of a scenario?
Well, I mean, and Jake, like you mentioned, even PSA is complex. It's over 1 million lines of code by itself. You have 7 products in just your portfolio.
That's
We
true.
have 30 something products at this point in ConnectWise. Like, you think about that as opposed to AI and trying to make everything, one, platformed, but two, making sure that they're all playing nice and talking to each other. Like AI, there's a huge opportunity for that, right?
Massive.
You talked about software eating the world. I actually used to say, in fact, I marched into our former founder's office one day and I said, if software is eating the world, APIs are the spice
Mm-hmm.
that's
Mm.
fueling that hunger.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about in essence, it's all about the data.
Yeah.
We have a lot of data, right?
Tons.
And
We
that's an interesting thing. And think of it from our perspective, but also from our partner's perspective, what that data represents, not only for, understanding the problem space or understanding, how solutions get there, like how we're actually accomplishing that, but like even to the tune of like how we get there efficiently.
Yeah.
Just to be in the mind of Musk, it has to be a scary and awesome thing in and of itself. But have the audacity to that. But he couldn't do it without
No way.
data.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So it means we're going to be able to solve some of the most challenging problems that MSPs face, or at least let's say challenging, some of the most annoying, painful problems.
That's a good word to use for that.
Right? So there's so much possibility here. I'm going to do an unplanned call for action.
Here we go.
If you have things that you say, hey man, I really wish ConnectWise would automate this with AI at connectwise.com. Send me that email, please. Because one of the challenges we have is categorizing and solving the things in the right order, because there's so many possibilities.
Yeah.
We can apply AI and this technology in so many different places. We'd love your feedback. So if you want to email us, I should probably
You're going to have 10
AI at connectwise.com. If you send us your thoughts or your requests, we will review all of them, because we honestly we covet that feedback, because there's just so many possibilities.
Love it. Love it.
That's good stuff.
Yeah. Let's say, Keith, do you have anything you want to add on this conversation?
As it relates to data, I think that's a great point.
Yeah.
Like what are the opportunities and challenges with data? I would say that the opportunities are vast, but the challenges are vast too. So as companies such as ours and yours go after it, I hear even more now that clean data
Mhm.
is what matters, and
Mhm.
clean data is not necessarily easy to get to.
Yeah.
Right. And so as we look at these things, and also safe data. So we got to meet with Microsoft a couple of weeks ago Great executive briefing. I met with the guys up there. I actually got Clippy on my coffee.
Oh, nice.
Right, they have a little printer at it, but
That's
so
awesome.
I got Clippy on top of my coffee, which was
Just
great.
in honor of you,
Info,
Jake, clearly.
Yeah, so
love it.
you had to get a cappuccino. You couldn't, or Americano. You couldn't do it in coffee. So then but anyway, it's got a little printer.
It's the data thing is so real, and you got these 10-year overnight success stories,
Yeah.
like Palantir.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, nobody knew what to do with them.
Yep.
Right. 10 years ago. Right. But what have they been doing? Accumulating
All
data,
the data.
trying to make sense of that data.
Yeah.
And now, keeping us and our allies secure. Right. I mean, so
Yep.
that is so huge. I mean, Keith, one thing I wanted to ask you, I don't know how much more time we have.
We've got time.
You got time. It's like, I keep thinking about a couple of things, right? One is inference at the edge.
Yeah.
Right. How's that coming along? And then I think about NVIDIA and the fact that their entire 2025 stock of Blackwell chips have already been accounted for.
Yep.
And it takes Ellison and Musk to have dinner with Jensen to get some Blackwell chips. It's like, I mean, what an amazing place to be.
Yep.
But at the same time, I think about, so there's a bunch that's required on the training side. Not that kind of power is not required on the inference side of the equation. And as you kind of just logically map that out to inference at the edge, where soon we will have inference available to each and every one of us in a very small format, maybe in our phones, maybe in our laptops, etc.
Sure.
What does that mean? How do you think about that world?
Yeah, so the inference at the edge. If you asked me a year ago, I thought we were going to keep making bigger models, and I would have made the case that the models are good but not good enough. They're good enough to be excited about, but the long tail of bad results, like you get 80% was good, but then it would hallucinate for 10%. That was so bad that you wouldn't operationalize that solution, because you couldn't have a technical support person get gibberish that would be spit out on that bottom 10%. So I would have thought then that you needed the huge model, and it didn't suffice for it to be small. But based on what we're finding and what I opened with is that they're overtraining these, they're further training these models and getting more and more out of less parameters, which means that it is approachable. So we're getting processors in our machines, the Copilot Plus that was first with the Qualcomm processor, which is a different architecture, and there's a couple software issues. But starting in the next month, you'll be able to get that from AMD and Intel. So you'll have a local processing in your machine. There's always already a really small model that you can get an app and certain versions of an iPhone and with Google. And I think, we're going to keep getting extra horsepower there and better small models there. But there's lots of things you can do. The voice inference, real-time translation, right?
Yeah,
so you're in a
that's great.
foreign country and you need to talk to people. But I think even that encoded intelligence, all of that stuff is great. I think we'll still go to the cloud for some of the heavier stuff. And that hierarchical approach is what Apple is taking. And I think we're going to see from Microsoft and others, which is, yes, there's a certain number of use cases, but I have a router of sorts that says these type of problems can be locally, and you get a lot more flavor and a lot more capabilities and a lot more intelligence and personalization. I think that's the next place. We call it memory. Microsoft called it recall. I think they, when they released it, they maybe, I think it was more that people got to see how it works. And they were uncomfortable with that, and they've never seen how Google's works or Apple's works. So they've become comfortable with the idea that people are keeping that memory. But to get personalized, you have to have memory, and we're going to have to secure that data. And that was another thing that came out of the Microsoft talks. There's a whole new lens for how we protect your data. Like we kind of protected data, but now it's going to another level, and it's not just the whole data store, but they're looking at labeling every type of data in that store, maintaining those labels through the layers of your application stack, such that you can choose to reject this type of data or accept this type of data at all the different layers. But I think that's the next thing that we're probably going to have to think about is all this personalization means that there's going to be even more access for good things and bad things, and we'll need to watch that. But I do think that at the edge, on your phone, on your computer, getting more and more personalized and learning how you would write an email, learning how you would have responded to something, or you would have started a PowerPoint.
Yeah.
The colors that you use and the format you use and number of slides you'd pick and how visual it is and how data driven it is. All of these things about you will start to get encoded and be able, AI at the edge will be able to further personalize. So that's how I think about it.
Love it.
It's
Love it.
Personalization.
That's awesome. Any closing thoughts from the rest of you?
Yeah,
guys?
I'm sitting here running through my head, and one of the things that I normally don't consider, it just keeps coming back to the top, is that we've had this debate at least once or twice about open source versus proprietary, and even Swarm as an example, how fantastic and awesome it would be in the right hands, is potentially dangerous in the wrong hands. And they've a guy was on one of the YouTube videos I watched. He said I had a 13-hour flight, so I hacked it basically and made it work with other models. Right? It's a Git, so it's all the code's right there. So he made it work with other models. So that now, did we just arm the bad guys with the agentic capabilities? And so I keep going back and forth. But there's also the other side of this, is saying, all right, if we hold everything close and we don't share it all, then it's going to become who can afford it. And then it will truly be the mighty who win, and nobody else will have a chance.
Yeah.
So there's two sides of this debate. I don't know. Again, I think history is probably going to be the only real judge here on whether or not we get it right or wrong. I just know that we are wielding awesome power now, and it's going to be critical how well we do it, or how poorly we execute it.
Pandora's box is already open. It's what we do with things inside that matter now.
Yeah.
Musk and Zuckerberg aren't going to stop on their open source. They have money sources that are out of AI itself, and they've decided to do scorched earth and do it free and open source. That's been their mantra. At least Zuckerberg has said, if we ever came up with a really great algorithm, we might make it proprietary. So far these guys are just leapfrogging. They're reading each other's white papers, and they're using the same data sets, and they're just doing nuances on it. And you'll see, give it 2 months, and one guy jumps, and one guy jumps, and one guy jumps, but nobody's here and here.
Right.
Like all the big guys are here and here and here and here, and they're growing together. So I think the cat's out of the bag. I think OpenAI talked about Strawberry or Q-Star for a year, and then released it, but it only took weeks for people to write white papers and say, here's what they did, and we're going to do it too. So I don't think there's no nuclear secrets in this arms race, right? I think all the big guys have it. So whether we like it or not, it's open. I do like that a lot of it is people that have my best interest in America. And you mentioned the Blackwell and our ability to scale and do processors and that kind of thing. And I think some of our people that might not be in our corner don't have that advantage. So
that's fair.
Yeah. So I like that. But yeah, I think this race is here to stay.
We went deep. Sorry about that. We went deep.
That was
Real
great.
deep.
I love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Any closing thoughts from you, Jake?
Oh no, this is great. I was looking forward to this session.
Yeah, absolutely.
I watched in amazement as you fostered and grew this community. And thank you so much for welcoming me to this. I really, really enjoyed this.
It's been great having you, man. Love to get you back on again.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love
That's
it.
what I'm hearing.
Love it.
So one of the things we referenced earlier was IT Nation. So
IT Nation is coming up.
we're a few weeks away from IT Nation.
Yeah.
Our next session is going to be on the 31st.
It's going to be on Halloween. We're going to have the Halloween episode. It's going to be great. We're not actually going to be dressing up unless Kyle decides to dress as a banana this year.
Please, who can't dress? I can't not dress up for Halloween.
There you go. So yeah, there is a code for IT Nation Connect. Scroll on the bottom of the screen. Click that. You want to be there this year. It's going to be amazing. I mean, not only is the nostalgia factor real with Tony Hawk as a keynote and Stone Temple pilots,
STP in the house.
like that's wild. Like I feel like I'm back in 2001
STP,
again, not
maybe.
UI2K. But yeah, like use the code, come hang out. You'll be able to see all of us. In addition to that, we are going to be doing a special episode of this series live from IT Nation. So Kyle and I are going to be hanging out with some really cool dudes named Matt Lee and Jason Slagle, talking about everything AI. So
Otherwise known as the master of chaos, Loki.
right,
That's Schlegel.
right, yeah, no, that's pretty accurate. All right, so yeah, we're going to be doing that, but for now, we're out of time. So thank you everybody for joining us today, and remember, knowledge is power, and with great power comes the ability to make sure that you are doing things more proactively. So take use of it. Have a great one, everybody.